Hi, this is Terry, and you are watching my first ever video entry for my blog, 50 States, 5 Years. The purpose of my blog is I just created a personal challenge for myself to visit all 50 states and DC by the end of August 2016. Hopefully you've been reading along on my blog for the past couple months and you already know the places I've been, where I've started. Today I'm going to talk about Richmond, Virginia, which is part 2 of 3 for the state of Virginia. You can catch up on part 1 and again other locations on my actual blog. I did a lot in one day, so I'm going to try to be quick and get to the point. I tend to talk a lot. Let's go. I went to Richmond from Washington, D.C. recently on the Megabus. I bought my tickets probably 2 or 3 weeks before I went and paid $4.50 round trip, which to me is excellent. You can just barely get a gallon of gas for that today, so I'm very excited about that. I got to Richmond at 9 a.m. Nothing I wanted to do opened up any earlier than 10. So my thinking was to go ahead and start walking and find some place to eat before I go. On my way to my first location, which we'll get to shortly, I passed a memorial called the Reconciliation Monument, or Reconciliation Memorial, excuse me. It's kind of like a statue of like hugging people with like this water thing going on, and it's supposed to symbolize moving beyond the negative history between the UK, Africa, and the United States, of course referring to the slave trade. I thought that was really cool, something I wasn't expecting to find just randomly in the middle of the city, so I thought that was neat. Anyway, so I'm walking. I find myself in trying to get to my first destination at the VCU hospital. VCU stands for Virginia Commonwealth University Hospital. I was a little weirded out by that. I've never been to a hospital if I wasn't a patient or if I wasn't visiting someone who was a patient. So that was different for me, but it's an adventure, so I did it. For just under $9, I had a really big breakfast. I stopped past the visitor services desk in the hospital, got a lot of great information. The first thing I got is this guidebook. It has a sticker from my first place. I don't want you guys to see it yet. Guide to Richmond, holiday happenings. Lots of great info about things in the Richmond metropolitan area, the most useful of which for me was this map of the city that shows basically everywhere I needed to be. Thought that was helpful. I also got a coupon for $2 off admission to my first stop, so I'm just gonna go ahead and let you know where it was. The Museum and White House of the Confederacy was my first stop. When I told my best friend about wanting to go there, she's a black female, she just kind of laughed, knowing my adventurous, devil-may-care kind of attitude towards things. She said, please don't get lynched trying to be Indiana Jones. And then I was telling a coworker that I was going to go do this on my day off, and he, being a white male, said, are you sure you want to do that? Not everyone has moved past 1865. And I definitely understand their concerns. I mean, I'd be foolish to not have at least thought what could happen if I went to a museum like this, being a black female. But I went anyway. I saw in a Lonely Planet guidebook that they actually are trying to get a more diverse visitorship. So I was all for it. What's the worst that can happen? That's my motto. So I went. Admission is normally $12 to get a tour of both the White House and admission to the museum. With my coupon from the hospital, I only paid $10. My White House tour was led by a woman named Betty, and essentially it's just like any other house tour you've ever been on. You learn about the structure and construction of the building. You learn about the antiques within it. You learn about what would have happened in each particular room. It just so happened that this building happened to have served as the White House for 4 years of the Confederate States. What I liked about the tour was that we didn't dwell too much on political aspects of the house. We more so dealt with the culture of the time, what the Davises would have done in different places of the house. Jefferson Davis having been president of the Confederacy, for anyone who wasn't aware. How his wife would have entertained guests, how he would have entertained guests. What did Victorian era people do in their homes? Why did they use the colors they used? Why did they have the devices and gadgets that they had? You know, that sort of thing. Every now and then you'd hear, and then, you know, General Lee came in this room and did. Or Abraham Lincoln, when the war was over, came here and said. Things like that. But for the most part, it was focused on the home, the function of the home, and the history of the building and the contents within it. Interesting thing I learned was that only 3 pieces in the museum never left, not the museum, in the White House, never left the White House. 2 of them being lamp statue things outside of the front entryway. The other being a fireplace on the first floor of the home. So I thought that was cool. After that, you go back into the museum. There's 3 levels. They suggest that you start on floor 2 and then go to 3 or 1, you know, in whatever order afterwards. Second floor is pretty much display cases that describe all of the battles of the Civil War, or at least most of them. And each case has uniform and artifacts from that battle. So I thought that was very cool to see the variety of uniforms, to see the case by case, battle by battle development of the Civil War, and just learning about it historically. Third floor focused mostly on the life of soldiers during the war. My favorite part was seeing the Drum and Bugle Corps uniforms. As a musician, I really just enjoy learning about other musicians from different time periods and different cultures and things like that. So I got a personal kick out of that. And then the lower level talked about women and children and how they lived during the war. And there's also a back room full of curiosities that the museum has gathered over the years, including jewelry made out of the buttons from uniforms, a prosthetic arm, and something that kind of weirded me out were little decorative things made out of the hair collected from Confederate soldiers. And I just thought that was completely ridiculous. But I was told that that was something popular to do at the time. And there are at least 3 or 4 of those there. So I think it's a little strange to make flowers out of man hair. But hey, it was the thing to do. I thought it was cool. I was a little disappointed that, I guess in an effort to not be controversial, slavery was hardly mentioned at all in the entire museum. In addition, there was no mention that I saw of blacks or other minorities that served for the Confederacy during the Civil War, or very much about women. You got a teaspoon about women spies, but not much. And I would have liked to see more of that. But, you know, I completely understand not trying to be controversial. Along that vein, I was the dummy that wore a t-shirt from my museum that I actually work at, just out and about, because it was a t-shirt and I was going to be out all day. And a guy in the museum recognized my job. And so we got into a conversation, and it started just friendly enough, but it ended up being a conversation about the role of museums in educating Americans, which is something I'm actually interested in as a museum professional. He asked me what I did at my place, and I told him. And I asked him, well, what do you do here? Oh, you know, I'm just the director. What? Like, I thought that was amazing that the head honcho of this museum just walks around his galleries and talks to his visitors. I thought that's very cool, and I think it shows that they understand that they have a controversial subject and that it's not for everybody, but that they're trying to make that knowledge accessible to everyone. So I thought that was cool. Moving on from there, I happened across the Maggie L. Walker House and Historic Site, which is ran by the National Park Service. I could tell it doesn't get a lot of visitors, even though I think it's an absolutely cool place. I'm also a history nerd that can be completely thrilled by finding an old box of soap. So, you know, I don't know. I loved it. When you go into the visitor center, you will see a ranger. My ranger happens to be a complete and total cutie. His name was Ranger Ben Anderson, and I learned through our introductory conversation that he is in his PhD studies at William & Mary in American history, and he's also a trombonist. Again, the musician connection. Musicians, we run the world. He took me to a room where I watched a 12-minute video that talked about the life of Mrs. Walker from birth through just before her death. And then he took me on a personal tour, I'm thinking because I was the only person there, through the rest of the site. The rest of the visitor center is set up like a mini museum to further explain and talk about the things that she achieved and accomplished. For anyone who doesn't know who Maggie L. Walker was, she was the first woman in America to charter a bank and the first African American woman to be president of a bank. So I thought that was very amazing. Other things I learned on the tour were she also created a department store and a newspaper. So this woman was very, very just amazing for her time. Very inspirational and just amazing. She passed in 1934. So the fact that she accomplished all this before 1934, to me, speaks volumes to her tenacity and character. The second half of the tour is actually of her actual home. And something neat that I learned was over 90% of the items in her home are original pieces. Up until recently, her family still lived there. So they've tried very hard over the years to keep her things together, if you will. So it's almost as if the family just up and left one day and here's all their stuff. Two cool things about the house. One is her son pledged Omega Psi Phi. For anyone unfamiliar with that fraternity, it was founded at Howard University, my alma mater, in 1911, and his membership certificate is actually on the wall, and he pledged at Shaw University in 1918. I'm not obviously a member of Omega Psi Phi, but I have lots of friends who are, and being a Howardite, it really just kind of made me smile a little bit, that that's something I could directly relate to. I know that. Yes, I know people used to wash clothes in a bucket with a washboard, but I have never actually done that. So to have that connection to something that I can directly relate to was neat. Also, this woman had an elevator in her house. An elevator. I mean, who today even has an elevator in their house? She had one almost 100 years ago. That's crazy to me. Because of diabetes, she was in a wheelchair the later part of her life. And even though this wasn't an electric one, it was an elevator that she could get in and two people would hoist her up and down. How amazing is that? And the elevator's still there. You can see it. You can't ride it, but it's still there and you can see it. And so I'm just completely and totally impressed by that. Excuse the heck out of me, Mrs. Walker. I think that's great. From there, I wanted to go to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I was told by Cutie Ben Anderson, my ranger, that I needed to get a cab because I could walk it. I love to walk. I walk all the time. But because my day was more than halfway over, I didn't want to take the energy it would take to walk there and then just be tired and grumpy the rest of my trip. So I walked the 2 blocks to Premier Bank at 320 North 1st Street. Please take note. I had horrible customer service in there. After I went and used the ATM, I went inside to get change. The so that I could, you know, get a cab. And I was never greeted, never said hello to. When I went to the teller window, rather than saying, "Hi, are you a customer here?" Well, no. Before I could get anything else out, "Oh, well, then I can't help you." Excuse me? You're not going to ask me, do I want an account? You're not even going to ask what I want, but you're just going to cut me off and just dismiss me? I was completely disgusted by that. So I said, well, let me at least go to the platform. I still need my cab. Even if I don't get change, I still need my cab. No one on the platform offered to help me. I stood there for several minutes. The only person who even talked to me after I was dismissed from the teller window was the security officer. And he instructed me on how to get to the closest hotel that could probably get me a taxi. Very disappointed in Premier Bank. That was my first experience with that bank, and it was even more disappointing learning that the bank that Mrs. Walker started eventually is now a part of Premier Bank. So I was just very disappointed all the way around. If I ever were to move to Richmond, I would never bank with Premier. And I hope if any of my friends do bank with Premier that you don't anymore, because that was terrible. 320 North 1st Street, Richmond, Virginia was the branch that I went to. Please remember it, because I will always remember that horrible service. But I wasn't going to let that get me down. I get to the Jefferson, gorgeous hotel, excellent customer service. I was offered a tour of the hotel because it's a historic site in its own right. Got a cab within 10 minutes. Really enjoyed the hotel. I thought it was really beautiful. They had alligator statues everywhere, and I found out that was because in the 20s and 30s people had alligators as pets, and when they realized, oh, I can't really take care of this, they would take it to the hotel. And up until the 40s they had alligators living in their pool. So I guess they just kind of kept that motif, so I thought that was neat. Anyway, get in a cab, end up at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which is across town. Gorgeous building. On the site there's a building that used to be an old Confederate soldiers, kind of like VA hospital retirement home kind of thing. Obviously it's not that anymore. If you see a Confederate soldier walking around from the Civil War, please run the other way, because they are the walking undead. That's just scary. But back to the real story here. Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, excellent building, 3 floors full of galleries. The day I went, the doors weren't really working to the galleries, so it was a little off-putting at first to try to figure out, oh, I'm supposed to open these doors when all the doors say, you know, exit only or whatever. It was a little strange getting around, but I figured it out. Gorgeous collections of Asian art, beautiful African art. I mean, they have art from every major civilization in there. Modern art, impressionist art, lots of furniture. I don't know how I kept running into places with old antique furniture, but that's fine. I loved it. I mean, every aspect of the visual arts you can think of were in this museum. And they had a temporary exhibit called Zubing, where the artists created all of these different pieces with tobacco leaves, cigarettes, and other smoking paraphernalia. Couldn't stay in there too long. I do have asthma, and the smell of cigarettes does bother me. But otherwise, it was a very gorgeous place. The interior, the building already looks big, but the interior is even bigger, if you can imagine. And I found myself towards the end just having to zoom through galleries in order to make time, because there was just so much to take in. Favorite part was the glass elevator. The only thing not glass is the floor. And it completely tripped me out that the ceiling and the walls and everything were glass. And I don't know, I just thought that was really cool. I wrote it like 3 times because I thought it was so neat. Disappointments were that the Fabergé gallery was closed the day that I went. I was very excited to see that. Fabergé is one of those names you hear all the time, and I just wanted to see something in person, and it was not meant to be. Maybe next time. Also, I was a week early for the mummy exhibit that they're getting, and it's apparently a really big deal, but I was a week early, so what can you do? While I was there, I went into the ridiculously expensive gift shop, and they had beautiful things, but just even for museum prices, it was a little pricey. I asked a couple people where I should go to eat, because by this point I had just under 2 hours before I needed to go. I was directed to Carey Street, which was relatively close, and told, oh, there's lots of shops and dining. Make sure you go to Galaxy Diner. I was referred to Galaxy Diner by 2 or 3 different people. So I'm walking, it's a very quaint neighborhood. I was just like, they must have like no crime here, because the streets were beautiful. It was just gorgeous. Loved it. I really was waiting for, you know, children to run out with butterflies chasing them or something. It was really great. Get to Carey Street, fell in love with all of the vintage and antique stores. One store in particular had 2 brooches. Brooches are my thing, if anyone cared. 2 beautiful brooches that came to a total of over $200 if I would have got both of them, and I didn't have $200 to blow, so I left them there. But I mean, I will be back, because it was just, they were just great. There were all sorts of shops, different dining options, but I was determined to find this Galaxy Diner that everyone had talked about. I got there, and by this point, after stopping in all these different shops, I had just over an hour. And I hope I didn't come across too rude, Galaxy Diner staff. If you're seeing this, I really hope I wasn't rude. I was just very nervous about being stranded in Richmond. I get there, I got a lemonade, an Aztec burger, which was a hamburger with avocado and salsa on top of it. Very good. They actually make their own potato chips, which were delicious. I got the macaroni and cheese at the recommendation of the waitress. Probably should not order that, because it tasted like Kraft mac and cheese with some salt on top of it. But, you know, whatever. Overall, it was really great. I called a cab through Rainbow Cab. They came in less than 10 minutes, and he got me to my destination in plenty of time to catch my bus home. So my day in Richmond, I guess that's 9 hours in Richmond, was amazing. I had a lot of great experience. One bad experience does not spoil the day for me. I hope this excites you to go check out my Facebook page. I took over 100 pictures throughout the day. Comment on them. Ask me questions of what they are, because I'll be honest, I'll probably just be too lazy to caption all of them if I remember what every little thing is. Comment on my blog. Read the blog. I'm definitely going to put more details on there. I know you're like, oh, you've talked enough already. Follow me on Twitter, at 50 States 5 years. Email me. Let me know what you think. I'd really love your feedback. I'm having a ball doing this, and I hope that you're enjoying listening. So with that being said, I just want to end with, I have finished the state of Maryland, and I have done the 3rd part of Virginia, and I'm already plotting on my next state. It's looking like it's going to be Ohio, but we'll see. Thank you so much, and see you next time.